If only we could get somebody to talk about something controversial up here. All these lightweight topics. Thank you very much, Fred. So you may have noticed that my chief job today is to introduce people. I have a great team that didn't ask a lot of me, and I get to do the most fun, which is to introduce people I care deeply about. And so now it is my honor to introduce our last speakers, our center's founders, champions, and namesakes, Dr. Stephen Moore and Mrs. Julia Dutton Moore. It's due to Dr. and Mrs. Moore's generosity and their shared belief in the importance of applying a public health approach to the prevention of child sexual abuse that we are able to conduct groundbreaking research at our center, communicate our findings to a broad audience, and bring us all together in this symposium to learn from one another about the impacts and the prevention of child sexual abuse. Dr. Moore is the president and CEO of Cardon and Associates, a family company started in 1977 that provides high-quality, community-focused senior living facilities across Indiana. He graduated from the Indiana University School of Medicine, trained at the Mayo Clinic in internal medicine, and then completed a residency here at Johns Hopkins Hospital, serving as chief resident in 1993. He also earned a master's degree in health policy and management here at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. In 2012, Dr. and Mrs. Moore founded the Moore Center for the Prevention of Child Sexual Abuse, and they served the university in other important capacities. Just last year, Dr. Moore stepped up to chair the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Health Advisory Board. The Health Advisory Board seeks to raise national and international awareness of the Bloomberg School's efforts to address serious public health problems, from clean water access to gun violence to the Zika virus, among others. Mrs. Moore is a nurse by training and previously rose through the ranks to administrative positions. She left that work to raise their daughter, Chloe, and their two older sons. In 2013, Mrs. Moore became an entrepreneur as the developer, owner, and operator of Chloe's of Captiva, a bricks-and-mortar and online women's clothing boutique located on the lovely island of Captiva in Florida. I have to say I hadn't previously really thought of the connection between child sexual abuse and a ladies' dress shop until Esther presented on one of her earlier young clients who said that that's what she wanted to do as part of her way of looking forward to the future. So it's great that there's more of a link there than I even thought. I will say from personal experience that Mrs. Moore's store it's beautiful. It's smartly curated women's offerings. But more to the point, her business has been successful. Most of you are somewhat familiar with the statistics of new businesses. 20% fail in their first year, and then 10% fail in each of the next 3 years, such that only about half survive to past the first 5 years. That Chloe's of Captiva is on track to beat those odds is, I believe, testament to Mrs. Moore's clear vision, her business acumen, formidable resolve, as well as her exquisite taste. And the Moore Center owes its existence as much to Mrs. Moore's vision and resolve as to Dr. Moore's foresight and passion. With that, please give a warm welcome to our founding donors, Dr. Stephen Moore and Mrs. Julianne.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that wonderful introduction. So this microphone just picks us up if we speak into the. All right, so we don't have to put anything on our lapel or move the mic up and down as in prior years. First of all, we just want to say thank you for letting us have the opportunity to speak in front of the audience today. We are very proud to share the stage with such wonderful researchers and people who are working and really truly dedicating their lives to protecting children. The experience, the insight, after following Fred, the passion, it's such an honor to be here at Johns Hopkins and working with you on this event. So Julie and I are both going to present this, and what we have is we have a scripted reading today. And the reason why is these are emotional issues, right? These are not just some hypothetical, something that happens to somebody else. These are events that have happened in our lives that bring us here today. And as a result, they can sometimes get emotional. So I find it helpful to just script it, write it down, and we'll work through this. And we just want to talk a little bit about kind of how we got here, why we're here, and what we hope to accomplish. So with that, we're going to share this a little bit, and we'll be done. All right. Thank you for allowing us to address the symposium today. Our names are Steve and Julia Moore, and I am an alumnus of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Julia and I are founding donors of the Moore Center, and more important is the fact that my grandfather was a pedophile who sexually abused my 3 sisters when they were children, forever altering their lives and the life story of my family. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you, to talk with you about several issues. First, I want to give a brief history of the Moore Center and give some background on how the center came to be located here within the school. Second, I want to talk about 3 observations related to my family's history with child sexual abuse. Third, I want to ask for help in preventing child sexual abuse. And fourth, I want to talk about our vision for the future.
Several years ago, while flipping channels, the news show 2020 caught my attention with an episode entitled To Catch a Predator. I assume some of you saw that. The premise of the show was that an adult decoy posing as a 13-year-old girl on the internet would invite men to her home under the guise of planning to have sex with them. The men would enter the home to be confronted by Stone Phillips, the show host, and then arrested. I watched in fascination and horror as man after man came into the home with the intent of having sex with a young girl. Given our family experience with child abuse, the program literally brought tears to my eyes, both for the fictitious child and the men who were uncontrollably destroying their lives.
During the show, however, they interviewed a psychiatrist, a physician from Johns Hopkins who had worked in the area of pedophilia. His name was Fred Berlin, and Fred said that we need a better way to deal with these issues. We need a prevention-based approach that would help prevent these events from ever occurring, an approach that would help the children and the men. The pieces began to come together for me, working with Johns Hopkins on the prevention of child sexual abuse. Shortly after that evening, my sister Kathy and her husband Steve Headley, myself and Steve contacted Ricky Fine in the development office at Hopkins, and Ricky arranged a trip for us to Baltimore.
When we arrived, we didn't know what to expect from the school. Child sexual abuse is a highly charged emotional topic, and frankly, we just didn't know if the school would be interested in taking on such a controversial issue. No school of public health had prior to this. In a still conference room, Kathy told our story with quiet resolve and dignity. As a result of our discussion, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health made a commitment to play a leadership role in defining the prevention of child sexual abuse as a public health problem that can be solved. One benefit of not being a researcher is that we are not held to the same academic rigor as the other speakers today. So now we'd like to change course and talk about some of the observations of what's happened in my family of living with sexual abuse and incest for about 45 years. Go ahead.
Okay. So one observation is that the whole truth is unknowable. The first observation I would like to present today is that the whole truth is unknowable. In my family's case, we know that my sisters were harmed by my grandfather. There were specific events of abuse in times and places that are fact. Because my parents found it so hard to believe that my grandfather could act so terribly toward his own family, and because as a family we were so unprepared to manage these issues, we stumbled. And because we stumbled, further harm was done. The validation of events can be consuming for victims and families, the search for who, what, and why. So what is unknown and perhaps unknowable? In my family's case, an important question is who else knew or should have known and should have protected my sisters. For example, did my grandmother know? Did my father's sister know? She grew up in the household with my grandfather. Was she abused? Did she know he was a pedophile? And if she did, why didn't she speak up to protect others? The circle of concern widens. Were others aware? Were others involved? We do not know. We cannot know. But the uncertainty destroys trust and corrupts relationships, which are the very fabric of a family. So why is this important? Why tell you these stories today? Because I believe the search for the whole truth is not enough in trying to address the challenges of child sexual abuse, either within my family or within society. Although we're consumed by accusations of CSA in the media in case after high-profile case, we must move beyond the search for the whole truth and develop an agenda of prevention.
The second observation that we want to discuss today is the realization that some injuries that occur in childhood cause harm throughout a person's lifetime. or as I like to say it, the injuries of childhood do not remain in childhood. This may be stating the obvious. We see many examples of physical health where childhood injuries last a lifetime. An extreme example is an amputation due to a car crash during childhood. My guess is that most of us have scars that will last our lifetimes from injuries that occurred in childhood. So how does this translate into mental health issues or into mental health scars? Again, using my family as an example, when something would happen that would cause these issues to resurface, my brothers and I would wonder, why can't the girls just get over it? Or that happened so long ago, and this was usually accompanied with an eye roll. Why is this still an issue? This happened when we were children. We did not understand the lifelong impact of child sexual abuse, although we frequently experience the challenge it creates. Why is this important for today's discussion? Because I feel that this lifelong injury creates a societal impact that is far greater than we estimate. We talk about those who are direct victims of child sexual abuse being approximately 10 to 17% of girls, which is a staggering number, right? Julie and I talked about this. She highlighted it for me to make sure we emphasize that how many people that is. It's outrageous. 10 to 17% of girls and 4 to 5% of boys being harmed before the age of 18. We know that child sexual abuse is a leading risk factor for a number of mental health problems, such as chemical dependency and major depression. In fact, we believe that child sexual abuse is the leading cause of preventable mental illness in this country. But what about those of us who are indirectly impacted by CSA? What about siblings and parents who struggle to understand and help manage the fallout of CSA injuries? What about the children of CSA survivors or spouses, partners who are trying to have healthy family relationships in an environment of mental illness? What about colleagues and friends who live and work, whose lives and work are impacted? By preventing CSA, we can have a tremendous positive impact on those both directly and indirectly impacted.
So I just want to repeat something Steve just said, and that is just the sentence. We believe that childhood sexual abuse is the leading or a leading cause of preventable mental illness in the country. I mean, it's a leading cause. It deserves some attention. Let's do some work to prevent it. So to continue, some people can't be healed and some people can't be punished. My third observation today is that some people can't be healed and some people can't be punished. When I was a second-year medical student, now I'm speaking as Steve because I was never a second-year medical student, but when I was a second-year medical student, I was looking at a slide of lung cancer in my pathology class. What struck me was the utter destruction and absence of normal lung tissue. The slide reminded me of pictures I had seen of Hiroshima after the atomic bomb. That slide showing absolute destruction caused by a preventable condition, lung cancer due to smoking, helped spark my belief in prevention. The injuries done to my family by the experience of incest have been profound and lifelong. Yes, we've had therapy as a family and as individuals, and yes, it's helped, but treatment cannot fully heal our injuries.
My grandfather died in 1982, at the age of 82 from natural causes. We do not know why he was a pedophile. We don't know if he himself was a victim of child sexual abuse. That is unknowable. We do not know how many children he harmed. When asked why he had committed such acts against children, including his family, his response was, "God made me that way."
He was never punished in the criminal justice system. Although the criminal justice system is an important part of responding to the epidemic, the nature of CSA, with its delayed reporting and its often unknowable facts, makes the criminal justice system ineffective in many, many cases.
Prevention would have been a much better model for my family. It could have prevented the injuries that will not heal and the crimes that cannot be punished. All right, it gets a little lighter now. We're almost there. Some of the lessons learned over the last year. So when I was a resident in preventive medicine residency here at Hopkins, I worked on tobacco control issues. During my clinical training in internal medicine at Mayo, I noticed something. I noticed that many of my patients had diseases that were related to smoking, tobacco addiction. They had lung cancer, COPD, cardiovascular disease, and stroke. The list goes on. When I started to look at the public policy issues related to tobacco, something horrible happened. I became aware that I was not the first person to discover that tobacco harmed people. Right? I thought I was in groundbreaking, observation, and that all my patients had lung, disease related to tobacco. And then I learned I wasn't the first person to know that. So I had assumed that people didn't know how dangerous tobacco was. I assumed my patients didn't know, or they would have stopped smoking. And I assumed the government didn't know, because if the government knew, we would have had better public policy designed to stop the epidemic. I assumed the tobacco companies, they couldn't have known, or how could they keep producing and marketing a product that, when used as directed, killed people? I thought I was breaking new ground, but then I started to see, I call it seeing the footprints of the people who'd come before me and tread this ground before. It was a new issue to me, but it was not a new issue to the world of public health, and that shocked me. Perhaps the word epiphany is too strong, but it changed my view of the world when I realized that patients and governments and tobacco company executives did know, but did nothing. And I want to just repeat that because I hope that sounds familiar. We kind of sometimes believe that people don't know. And for me, it was an observation at the time they did know, but they did nothing. And sometimes I feel that applies to what we're experiencing a little bit here. I was reminded of my experiences in tobacco control recently when I saw the movie Spotlight. I hope you've seen it. I would recommend it if you haven't. It's about a group of investigative reporters in the Boston Globe, and they investigated the report on child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church in Boston. And what struck me about that is those reporters had that same experience that I was having. They would find one more experience where they go, it was new to the reporters, and they'd go, nobody knew this, right? And then they'd realize that, no, they did know it, and they didn't do anything about it. It was like, to me, it was the tobacco experience that I had as a resident. There were just two issues I want to discuss about child sexual abuse using this example of tobacco control. First of all, these issues take time, right? The tobacco, I was just looking, Luther Terry, who came out with the Surgeon General's report, came out with the report in 1964. Julie reminded me she was born that year.
You didn't have to share that.
I was born in 63.
I meant 74.
Yeah. So that's 51 years old. And what happened, though, is
Yeah.
I'm going to be walking home tonight, I can tell. The point is, it's taken literally 35, 40, 50 years for meaningful policy to come out. They came out with the Surgeon General's report in 1960s, but it took literally years. And so my point is, we have to be patient because it's going to take us a while. So we recently had talked to a colleague who works in child and adolescent health issues, and he remarked to us that it took his organization about 25 years to see meaningful impact on their issue. I've always believed that we here at the Moore Center are just a link in the chain of events that will bring meaningful improvements to the prevention of child sexual abuse. But I must confess that a 25-year time frame is scary, because it causes me to ask the question, how do we have the resources to sustain meaningful prevention research for 25 more years? The second item from the tobacco control movement example is a question. Evidence suggests that society does understand. And Elizabeth, please understand, whenever I write these, I have Elizabeth review them to check my facts. So she was pointing out, evidence suggests that people do have an understanding of how common CSA is, and in fact do have some understanding of the long-term complications created by CSA. But how do we demonstrate to society that CSA, similar to tobacco-induced disease, is preventable? How do we show the connection, and how do we get them to believe it, and then take action on that? Okay. Sorry.
So every day there's a new incident reported in the press related to CSA. One recent event was the arrest and conviction of Jared Fogle, the spokesperson for Subway restaurants, on the crimes related to CSA. This story was of particular interest to me because Jared lived in Indiana, so the arrest and trial were very prominent in the local news. In fact, Jared was a student at Indiana University when he ate the Subway as a college student and lost all the weight. The Subway that Jared visited during his weight loss is about half a mile from our house. I personally, with the support of the Moore Center staff and the permission of the school, reached out to the leadership of Subway to request a meeting. We tried several informal channels and we sent a letter to the leadership team, but we did not receive a response. In fact, during all the news coverage of the events that I read, there was not a single mention made of the bigger social issues related to child sexual abuse.
So what frustrated me is we saw story after story about it. I saw the helicopters. I was in Indianapolis the day that they were doing the sentencing. I didn't understand why we had all these helicopters hovering over the city, and then I saw the news, and they were sentencing Jared that time. But there wasn't a single counterpoint. We weren't effective in getting in front of the media, using this as a media opening and saying this can be prevented. These are the things we should be advocating for. And I keep feeling we've got lost opportunities as a result of that. Several years ago, Scott Letourneau spoke at this symposium. I had the opportunity to speak with Scott over lunch, and he was talking briefly about the impact of the Penn State scandal on his family. At one point, he stopped and said, "The paternal family did not choose this." My response was that the Moore family didn't choose this either. Child sexual abuse is not an issue that any family or organization or individual would choose. Penn State did not choose it. The Catholic Church did not choose this. Many schools and youth-serving organizations did not choose this. The House Republican leadership under former Speaker Dennis Hastert did not choose this. Subway did not choose this. The list goes on and on. The issue of child sexual abuse comes into our lives uninvited through many different avenues. The question is not whether or not we chose it. We did not. But rather, the question is, what do we choose to do about it? I'll just finish this.
Yeah.
Too often, organizations that have been negatively impacted run away from this issue, and Subway is an example of this. We need to reach out to these organizations that know how the impact and the harm caused by child sexual abuse, and enlist their help. My point is this: we need allies. We have a long road in front of us, and we need allies who will help us with this issue. To me, in medicine, we have the grateful patient. That happens when someone has a disease, they get treated, they do better. That person then gives back then for future patients, to help future patients. We have not been able to recreate that model in public health, especially around this topic. In my opinion, there should be an opportunity for those organizations, such as Subway, who've been impacted by this issue in a very negative way, to partner with us and drive positive change for the benefit of others. So far, it hasn't worked, but I keep thinking we will. We won't give up.
So what are we trying to accomplish? There's a famous story in the history of public health about a cholera outbreak in London and a man, John Snow, who was one of the world's original epidemiologists. At that time, people did not know what caused cholera, and so when an outbreak occurred, it was disruptive and very dangerous. John Snow took a different approach. He investigated the outbreak and he asked questions of people who had the disease. Through his investigation, he determined that there was a common experience that people in the outbreak shared. They were obtaining water from a specific well in the city. John Snow was a man of action. Not only did he determine that the well was somehow linked to the cholera outbreak, he famously took the handle off the well and took the handle off the pump and disabled the well, stopping the outbreak. The Moore Center is working to play the role of John Snow. We are asking questions and doing research that will help us better understand the pattern and risk factors associated with CSA, and we are working to create interventions that will disrupt CSA. Like Snow, we focus on prevention, and we want to take the handle off the well. Completing research and creating and testing effective interventions will take time. We need a tremendous sense of urgency and a tremendous sense of patience. Hopefully, we can learn from prior public health campaigns and shorten the research, intervention, impact cycle from decades to something much shorter. Finally, this work will take the collaborative effort of many people and organizations working together on the primary prevention of CSA.
Just lastly, thank you for allowing us to share our stories and observations with you today. We would like to end with one last story. My 80-year-old mother talks about how when she was a child, she had friends and neighbors who developed polio. She's mentioned one of her school classmates who developed polio and whose parents placed the child's iron lung in the window so the child could see other children walking to school and wouldn't feel so alone during recovery. Here we are 70 years later, and we have virtually eradicated polio in the United States to the extent that our 13-year-old daughter, Chloe, has no fear of polio. In one generation or two generations, we've been able to take what had been, in my mother's time, the single biggest fear of her parents when she was a child, that of a child contracting polio. And now it's not even a concern. Our hope is that we can have the same impact on child sexual abuse, and that in time, children will be free to live a childhood without the experience of sexual abuse and its attendant lifelong injuries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing again with us your story, Steve and Julia and Chloe. As I've previously mentioned, the center is in our 4th year, and I think we've achieved a considerable amount in this short time, not least of which is the growth of this symposium. Today we heard from some leading researchers, from a senior media editor, and from family members affected by child sexual abuse. From their comments, I think it's clear we're part of a driving force behind a monumental shift in how we think about child sexual abuse. More and more stakeholders are willing to view this as, and to consider to view it as preventable, to consider alternatives to the criminal justice approach upon which we've relied for so long. And I really do believe that now is the time to push for meaningful change in the form of policy that encourages and funds the development, evaluation, and dissemination of effective prevention programming. You heard about one of our center's key prevention projects, the Help Wanted project from Ryan earlier today. We have two others that I want to briefly mention. One is a universal prevention program that targets 12 and 13-year-old children and their parents with messaging around responsible behavior with younger children. This would be a school-based intervention that would teach 12 and 13-year-old children who are becoming sexual, not just that it's not okay to involve younger children in sexual behaviors, but why. And teach parents, give parents some skills and tools and knowledge around preventing the harm that can come both to the child who is victimized by an older child and to the older child. That harm being all of the consequences that can occur in the juvenile justice system. This is a universal prevention program that focuses on preventing harmful behavior. It's the first time, to my knowledge, that the National Institute of Health has been willing to go down this particular road, to look at universal prevention that really focuses on teaching children to avoid engage in harmful behavior rather than trying to teach little kids to protect themselves. We need to give children information about sex, correct information about sex. And I have to say, until today, I was the only person that was willing to talk about penises and vaginas up on this stage. And I was so pleased when you guys were willing to say that. We have to tell 12 and 13-year-old kids, you're starting down a wonderful road. We hope it's towards very healthy sexuality, but you can't touch the penises and vaginas of little kids. And here's why. So that's something that I'm very proud of that our center has achieved. Again, I think it's fairly groundbreaking that we're able to get the leading research funding institution of the United States to begin to shift how it looks at prevention, that we can't rely on 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-year-old kids to keep themselves safe. We've got to rely on older kids and their parents and other adults to keep them safe. That particular prevention program is called Responsible Behavior with Younger Children. The other prevention program I'm engaged in, or our center is engaged in, is being led by our colleague Tamar Mendelson, who's here with us today. And that focuses on parents of younger children, and again, providing them with the tools and the skills and the knowledge to have those conversations and to engage in the behaviors that promote healthy sexual development of their children. And maybe those kids will be less likely to be victimized, but my real belief is those kids will be less likely to go on and inadvertently engage in harmful behavior. And so that is a parent-focused parent props, promoting positive sexual development that we are partnering with our friends and colleagues at the Baltimore Child Abuse Center, which is our local child advocacy center here in Baltimore. So we're doing a lot, but we have, as I think you would agree, a lot of work to do. And it's going to take all of us in this room, everyone who's joining us online, and everyone outside of this room to do it. We know that this is a preventable public health problem, and we know we can prevent it. I really think the tide is shifting, and we're going to move towards adding prevention to the criminal justice and the other solutions that we've developed and relied on. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank our presenters. I want to thank our family members. I want to thank everyone who came in today to be part of the solution. And I do want to say one last thing, a little housekeeping tip. Again, there's a survey that we'd ask you to fill out. We take the feedback very seriously. We think it's helped improve and grow our symposium, so please take a moment, and our staff will collect those on the way out. You've made it to the end of an emotional, long day. Congratulations, and again, thank you for joining us today.